Okay, it looks like we're live and on the air. So welcome everyone. My name is Michael Leoppky. I am a real estate agent, better of MaxWell Devonshire Realty. And this is the first part in an 11-part series that we're hosting on new home building in Edmonton. And it's being put on by MaxWell Devonshire Realty. Our moderator today is Alex Ward, the broker of MaxWell Devonshire Realty. So he's going to be keeping an eye on us throughout and making sure that things are running smoothly. He's also going to be moderating and monitoring the question and answer section of the meeting here. So if you're joining us by Zoom, there is a Q&A box there that you can ask questions. Alex will be going through those and asking them at the appropriate time, whether interjecting with myself and our guest, or waiting for the specific question and answer period, which we will have at the end of the show today. So thank you for everyone who is joining, and for those of you who are watching possibly the recording of this on YouTube later on, really appreciate you coming to check this out. I think we're going to have a lot of really good, useful information, and that starts with our guest today. So you may already have heard, when it comes to purchasing any home, the first step is to make sure that you know what you can afford, that you know what works for your budget, and that you have a pre-approval of some kind in place. So we're going to start there on a new build because it is so incredibly important. And I think financing for a new build is going to be sometimes quite a bit different a process than buying an existing home through the MLS market. So our first guest here today is Dinah Rogers. Dinah is a mortgage specialist, longtime mortgage specialist with RBC. And Dinah, would you like to say hello to everybody? Maybe tell us a little bit about who you are and what your history is with mortgages and with build mortgages specifically.
Sure. I have been a mortgage specialist with Royal Bank now, coming up 16 years. Prior to that, I was with another lender. I do focus a lot in the builder market in the Edmonton and greater area. So, and I've also gone through the build process. So I've seen it from the other side of the table as well.
Amazing. And it's good to have that experience on the other side of it as well, right? Kind of opens your eyes up to a few different things. So I guess we'll kind of jump right in here, Dinah, if that's okay with you. If I'm looking at building a new home, I've never done this before. It's a completely new concept to me, but I've got in my mind that I'd like to build new. What are some of the mortgage considerations that I need to be aware of at the start of that process?
First of all, to qualify for any mortgage, it's always three fundamentals. We look at your income, because that gives us budget. We look at credit, because that tells me what we have for obligation. And we look at equity, because it spells ICE, or down payment. So what do we have for down payment? So those are always the three basics for a pre-approval. But when you're going to build a house, there's a few additional considerations. So it's really important that your lender understands what your overall goals and plans are when they're giving you advice. So for example, how long is it going to take to build this home? Do you already own a home? Are you going to stay in that house during construction? If you're not, where are you going to stay while the house is being built? If you're selling a house, are you going to be using that for your down payment? And if you sell, can we add that money back to your mortgage? So there's a lot of pieces here that we need to look at, and then we can offer the best solutions. So for example, if you're selling, but you're not going to have those funds available until possession, I might actually do a step approval for you. I might have to do an approval initially with what you have available for down payment. And then I might have to go back in after the fact and do a second revisit once we have the sale proceeds to take into consideration.
Okay. And so in a scenario like that, if I have a home that I have to sell and I have equity in my home that I can't access till I've sold the home, I'm not selling the home till much later in the process, because I'm going to hopefully try and time things out to some extent to sell my home as the new home is completed. and now I have a bunch more money to put down. Does that affect the approval when you go back to look at that, or?
That's a good question. And so your builder needs to know that you're approved up front. So as you
Mhm.
sit today is how I have to approve you. If that means we have 2 houses and we don't have those sale proceeds, I have to take that into consideration. So first of all, I'm going to get approval number 1. But yes, when we go back and anytime you make any financial changes on the mortgages, it will technically go through the circle again.
Okay.
Generally speaking, you're already approved. And especially if you're putting more money down, it shouldn't have any bearing as far as requalifying.
Right. Okay. And I assume we'll probably get a little bit more in depth in that requalify conversation. But it's so it's clearly so important to have that whole picture for the client up front. So it's a lot more than just crunching numbers. It's having a broader understanding of where the client's coming from, what their circumstances are beyond just the ICE, that income, credit, and equity, and then how they're going through this process. And that's important for you to have an understanding of that. Is there anything particularly different about working with a builder for the mortgage financing?
Absolutely. So when you're building, there's either going to be one of 2 ways that your builder is going to be looking for their financing. One is called a draw and one is called a completion. So what does that mean? In a draw, it means the builder gets money from the lender as they build the house, or what's called draws or stages. The first draw is typically when the foundation is ready. The good side about a draw mortgage is that a lender is usually holding your rate for a shorter period of time because it only takes 4 months or 6 months to get that foundation. The disadvantage, however, though, is that the bank doesn't give you money for nothing. There's going to be interest on those draws. So the builder that you're choosing may pay part of that interest. They might pay none of it. So there might be the cost of interest for you to consider during the build. The draw mortgage process also requires appraisals. So every time we have to get a draw, we need an appraisal. Some lenders are going to charge you a flat fee. Others are going to charge you per draw. And others, like us, pay for that cost. Once the draw is advanced, you can't change your mortgage amount and you can't change your rate. So if we're back to that scenario of maybe selling a house in the future, a draw might not be the best kind of mortgage for you. So now we have the other option, which is a completion mortgage. Benefit on this is there isn't any interest accruing because it doesn't have any money funded until possession. Another benefit is you have the ability to reset the amount of your mortgage. So if you decide to put more money down, we have the option of going back and revisiting your rate many times over the process. So for example, this last summer when we had those bottom rates for COVID, a lot of my older clients were super happy because I could reset their rates to those rates. A disadvantage, though, is that we're now holding your rate for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever the case may be. So it might be a slightly higher cap to protect you.
And on that note, Dinah, are you noticing that build time has gotten longer over the last year and a half or so? Or like, have you had to extend rate holds at all, or is that an option?
Absolutely, that is happening. There's trade delays. There's cost changes for some of the builders. We had beautiful balmy weather in December. No one got their foundations done. Absolutely. I'm going to speak to that a little more in depth though, because that is a very important consideration. What if your house
Okay.
isn't ready on time?
Absolutely. Okay, awesome. So certainly more questions that I, as a buyer, need to be aware of when I'm considering which builder to choose, because sometimes it's not always just a matter of which model or floor plan I like the best, but it's understanding how they're structured from a financing perspective, and if that structure fits my needs.
Yeah, and so just there's a variety of lenders to choose from, obviously.
Mhm.
But just like all builders have different options, they have different quality, they have different specifications. Same thing with your lenders. So here's some reasons why you need to do some homework, just like you're doing the homework to buy your house.
Mhm.
Lenders for qualification, some lenders are going to recheck your credit and they're going to reconfirm your income 30 days prior to possession. If your financial situation's changed, that's a big problem. So for example, last year, again, we can thank COVID, a lot of people were laid off. This affected applications that were already in process. So you'll have to have a lender that's going to guarantee that you're not subject to requalifying, either for credit or for income prior to possession. When it comes to rates and pricings, not all lenders are created equal. In the case of a draw mortgage, there's very few that offer draw mortgages now. If you're using a broker channel, usually they only have the ATB Credit Union Scotia on their side. Of the lenders who do offer draws, most of them charge what's called an open interest rate. And why that's not a great deal for you is because an open rate is always expensive. And secondly, your rate isn't necessarily guaranteed until you get closer to possession. So if you're the person paying for that interest and you're paying double what you could be paying, yeah, that's kind of a big consideration. On a completion mortgage, let's talk about that rate hold. If they hold your rate for only 6 months, for example, but your house isn't ready, you lose your rate. The rate expires and it's going to be the current rates. And where we are right now, that means they're higher. And then for some of these lenders, if the rate expires, so did your approval, and you have to go through the process again.
You have to redo everything.
For some of them, yeah.
Interesting.
And a lot of builders now have a preferred lending list. And the reason they have this is because they've run into a lot of issues with lenders that often brokers can use, but they might seem to have a really good rate. But because they've had so many issues when it comes to the paperwork and with numbers for draws, especially, they're now charging surcharges to use those lenders. So it does matter what lender you're going to pick.
So to clarify that, the builders will often have sort of an upfront preferred lenders list at the sales center, which is there mainly as a tool or a benefit to the buyer to be able to have a few different options and talk to some experts if they haven't already connected up with somebody. But then they will also have in their agreements a schedule where if it's an A lender, there is no charge, but if it's a B or a C lender, there's different additional charges that they add on due to some of the extra hurdles involved in that closing process.
Yeah, the builder wants to run this very smoothly, and so do you. So to prevent the stress, they want to deal with people who know what they're doing, number one, but have the capacity and the ability and the infrastructure to set these up properly, especially on a draw.
Right.
So I realize I'm providing some like generic information about how to qualify, but I can't overstress about the lender because it's not just lowest rate, because lowest rate doesn't make best mortgage. So when we come back to these delays and these rates that are expiring, from where we were in the rate game of 1.89s or 69s or whatever they were 6 months ago, we're now at 2.69 or whatever. This can mean $200 a month difference on that budget that you had for a monthly payment. So that makes a real big difference for you now. It's costing you in your pocket. You don't have to get approved, but it's going to cost you in your cash flow.
So I just want to pause there and just explain for the people viewing and listening. Why would I not have to get pre-approved at that point if the rate's gone up by a full point from what I'm approved for?
Because a few years ago, the federal government introduced something called a qualifying stress test. I just call it stressful because you have to qualify at 5.25 for an interest rate, and we're not close to those rates.
Right.
So if there's variation in rates in between the begin to the finish of your mortgage, like the build time, you're still okay because you got
Okay.
qualified at the 5.25.
So that stress test made it so that you have to qualify a client, a buyer, at that higher rate. And then even though the rates have gone up 1%, it's not affecting the approval. They're still approved, but it is certainly having, from the sounds of it, a pretty big impact on their budget.
Correct.
Which could affect them in other ways beyond the approval point.
Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly. So when I recently built my home, I shopped all the lenders too, because I really wanted to understand what the differences were. And not that I'm here to necessarily promote RBC, but obviously I work there. And when it comes to our builder mortgages, what I found on those completion deals, we are the only lender that does an automatic extension to that interest rate. So if your possession or commitment date was May 1st and your house wasn't ready, I have the ability to move it to June 1st. House not ready, I can go to July. House not ready, I can go to August. So we're the only lender that allows up to 90 days over and above. And that usually is sufficient. I'm not seeing delays that are a lot more than that at this time. But if you don't have the ability for that extension, some lenders told me, oh yeah, maybe we will see what we can do. We might be able to extend it 30 days. Well, that's not a commitment. That's a maybe. And I don't want to count on a maybe.
Right.
And when you're dealing with the draw mortgage, what I found is that we're the only, well, one of the very few that actually charge your contract rate. So it saves money during the build.
Right. And of course, that does vary from builder to builder, because as you mentioned, I think earlier, some builders they cover that interest or a portion of it sometimes. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So
A lot of them do.
That's an important question to be asking early on in the sales center. Have your agent find out which builders are draw and which builders cover any of or all of the interest payment on those draws. And that can certainly have an impact on your decision making, because those payments over the course of a year-long build, they can add up, right?
They're significant.
Right. So we've talked about the draw versus completion. I want to talk a little bit more about the build process, if that's okay.
Sure.
So you've helped me out. We've gotten my pre-approval. We know what type of it's a draw, it's a completion. Now I'm going through the process with the builder, right? I've picked out my floor plan. I've bought my lot. I put my deposit down. With a lot of builders, there is the option during the process to go into a design center or a selection center of some kind. What if I go in there and I add a bunch of upgrades? So I add an upgrade to my flooring and I add some, nicer appliances, and I do up my lighting, and before I know it, I've spent another $30,000. How does that impact or play into my mortgage approval? Can I roll that in?
So most builders are going to give you an allowance, they call it. So a budget for when you go to your design center. So 20,000, 30,000, whatever's realistic. But if you're like me, I blew my budget in the first room, right in my cabinets, until I needed more money. So yes, that happens. And so if we're going to do some upgrades, there absolutely is the option of adding them to your mortgage. But it's really important that we do this as soon as possible, near the beginning and not at the end. You're going to have to go back through, if you put 5% down or 10, 15, you're an insured mortgage. Not only the bank is going to re-review you, so is CMHC or the insurer. If you're adding $5,000, it's probably not a big deal. If you're adding 50,000, it could be that they want to relook at numbers again. So you're going to have to requalify if you add to your mortgage. You have the option of paying cash for those upgrades, with the exception, if you have used the first-time homebuyer incentive, you cannot pay 1 penny out of pocket. It must be in your purchase contract if you change the dollar amount. It's that
Oh,
program. You must match, your purchase price must match at the end.
okay. Interesting. I didn't know that. That's just for their tracking purposes, or is there?
No, because the way the first time home buyer incentive works, so we might as well talk about that.
Yeah, that sounds
It's an
good.
incentive. It's not a gift. It's not a present. It's not zero down. You still have to have your down payment. But in the case of a build, the incentive will give you, the government will give you up to 10% of the purchase price. You can choose between 5 and 10, but you might as well take the 10. So that is an interest-free loan that you have to pay back when you sell the house. The catch is you have to pay it back plus 10% of any gain of your equity on the property. So, you know, it may or may not be a good program for you. It's very limiting who can qualify because the program limits your buying power. So you might qualify for a $400,000 house. If you use the program, you only qualify for $350,000. So it's a
Gotcha.
limiting program.
Okay.
But the point is if you go in after the fact and you change your purchase price by $1, it no longer matches that original amount they agreed to give you. And that is where we have the problem. So if you're going to do any upgrades, you have to first of all check with your lender that you can do that if you're using the program.
Right.
And you need to make sure it goes through the paper process.
So I'm hearing also, Dinah, communication is really important, not just at the beginning when they're providing income information and employment information and all of that stuff, but throughout the build, it's important for them, me, the client, the buyer, to have ongoing and regular communication with you as to what's happening financially with the build, and probably even in my own life financially, what's happening from what you've said, right?
I like to ensure that we have many touches during a draw mortgage, but minimum touches should be when you have the foundation completed, because we're usually within 6 months. Drywall stage, we're now within usually 4 months. You're going to get your letter of notification of possession, usually 30, 35 days out. Those are all touch points that you need to be talking with your lawyer, your realtor perhaps as well, but definitely your lender, because I'm going to be revisiting where we are for dollars and cents. And if there's opportunity for lower interest rates, I'm definitely going to be looking at that for you as well.
Okay. So yeah, having a experienced, qualified team of professionals around you to help guide you and have those touch points in place is really important. Sounds like it could save a lot of headaches. So another thing that can come up, and when I worked for builders, this oftentimes came up when I was in a sales center working with buyer clients. I want to build a home with builder XYZ, but I don't want to have them develop my basement. I'm going to develop my own basement after the fact. Can I add that reno value, or I'm going to build my own garage, or whatever it is? Can I add that value into my financing up front?
Yes. You'll have to qualify as if that was part of the original purchase price. So you'll qualify for that total amount. It's something that you need to understand. If you're going to do that, you need to prove that you have the ability to do that. So we can approve you for 400, but now you need 40,000 to do the basement. You have to complete the work, and then the bank will release the funds to you. So you need to be able to come up with that $40,000 difference out of your own pocket, do the work, then you will get the release from the bank for those works.
So that's what you would call a purchase plus mortgage.
Yeah, purchase plus improvements, we call it.
And that's interesting. So in a purchase plus improvements, I'm not getting finance, and then I take possession of my home, and you give me $40,000 cash to go and develop my basement. I have to do the work and pay for that out of my own pocket with that additional money, and then you reimburse it after the fact.
Correct.
Okay, I guess that's a really important piece of information to be aware of for people who are thinking about doing that work after the fact and wanting to borrow that money. You're borrowing it, but you do still need the money upfront to be able to do the work. Thank you. That's a really good clarification. So there's another element to building. So we've talked really mainly primarily about sort of new build and what we're talking about, draw and completion. A lot of that pertains specifically to production builds or communities where the builder, the developer owns the land and all of that. But another big thing in Edmonton is specifically is infill and self builds. So say I find a really nice piece of land, whether it's a lot in a mature neighborhood or maybe an acreage lot or something, but I just want to buy the land, but I'm going to build my own home on it, or I want to hire a builder to build on it. Can you talk a little bit about some of the differences there?
Whenever you purchase land, it's not included in the total purchase contract with a builder. It's a completely different kind of financing. So when your land is owned separately, you have to have 20% of the entire project. So if your land is 400 and your build is 600, we're talking about $1 million, you now have to have 20% down payment. So we need $200,000. But in addition to that, if your build is going to be the 600, we need to know that you have at least 10% of that to cover the government requirements for builder lien holdbacks. And we need to have a cushion of another 10% because maybe you upgraded things and you've run out of money in your budget. So the bank's going to want to know that you have probably 30 to 35% of the total project available up front at the time of approval. So you need deep pockets to do that. And in your case of infills, kind of the same idea. You're buying that land and then you're going to build. So it's the same concept. But in that case, you need even deeper pockets because we won't pay for the demolition and we're not going to pay for you to prep the land and clean the land. So those are added costs that you're going to need cash resources for.
Gotcha. Okay. And any engineering or anything like that that's required on that land, I would imagine would fall into that category as well.
Yeah, but we do them all the time. I mean, not
Okay.
all lenders will do them, but we will do them. Absolutely.
Okay.
But
So,
you just need to have resources up front.
Right. There is a way to do it, but you need to know upfront what you're looking at as far as needing cash in pocket, and you need to know what those particular nuanced steps of the process are with the lender as well. That's also really important because I know it's sort of I think it's still an ongoing thing. It's growing. It's getting more relevant as we go. So it becomes a really important component in the builder side of things. So I guess we've covered sort of the production side, draw, completion, we've covered upgrades. We've covered infills. I guess, is there any, we're running out of time too. Are there any sort of last thoughts that you have that you want to go over? Is there anything that I missed asking about?
I think that it's so important to choose the right lender. And I say that with passion and conviction because I really do mean it. I get these phone calls from people that thought they had something that they were promised and they don't have it anymore. So it's not just the rate, it's protecting yourself during the build. It's ensuring that you have a lender that has the capacity and the ability to take care of everything in this process. Something that comes up all the time too, for example, when you're selling a house is you might need interim financing. Well, when you're at that stage and your lender tells you they don't do it, or they'll only do it if you have both mortgages with you, now you have a big problem. So just because you have the cheapest interest rate doesn't mean it's not going to cost you in a different way later on. So it's really important to review the builder standards and reputation. Same goes with your mortgage approval. And so your realtor, your builder sales rep, your mortgage person, they're all going to work together. And Mike, you and I go back a long way and have a wealth of experience in the builder market. So we want to ensure that that process is seamless, stressless, so that we can get you to your new home having fun picking the things and the colors and not stressing about my mortgage rate is expiring next week.
Absolutely. Well said. And it is I've been through it enough times. And so it is a stressful experience. There's going to be stress. But certainly the more time spent at this point in those beginning stages, and as you're exploring and learning and interviewing experts in the field, in my experience, that time is well invested, because it does equal much less stress throughout the process and a much more enjoyable process. And that's really what it should be about, having fun and enjoying your home. So thank you so much, Dinah. I really appreciate you coming on.
You're very
And sharing
welcome,
your.
and welcome to email me or call me if you have any questions. I mean, the education piece is huge. You're making a huge investment. You want the right advice.
Right. Alex, were there any questions that came up that we weren't able to cover through the program, or
Nope.
is there anything?
Nope.
No, we
All good.
managed to cover off everything. Wonderful. Well, yes. Again, thank you, Dinah. Thank you, everyone, for joining. If there's anything that we missed covering that you wanted to know about, or if you want more detail on anything, if you're an agent looking at helping a client build a new home, or if you're potentially looking to build your own, please feel free to reach out, contact myself. I'm available anytime for questions. Contact Dinah as well, and or I can put you in touch. So thank you so much, Dinah. Thank you, Alex.
You're very welcome.